You're listening to this week's episode of the Vacation Rental Business in Today's World podcast. You're about to start transforming your business and life with the information found here. We interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in the vacation short-term rental industry and supporting businesses. The information found here is a combination of brain science, transformational thinking, safety and loss prevention, and vacation short-term rental knowledge and experiences, all rolled into one to help you and your business to achieve levels you never thought possible. I am glad you are here, and now please welcome your host, Eric Thibodeau.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Safer VRs. I'm Eric Thibodeau, and I'm your host. Glad you're here this week. Last week, I apologize. I was out, didn't do a podcast. My mom was in the hospital, and so I was there last week with her. Probably be back later next week. So hopefully she continues to do better. Appreciate your prayers. This week I'm in Orlando taking a course, continuing education course from my CEU on safety. So looking forward to learning more about that. And I'll be talking about that probably in the future weeks. And this week we're going to talk about self-verification. And the title of this podcast is why self-verifications are more effective than inspections. So let's talk a little bit about, an inspection is where I go out and I look at something. I could look at a smoke detector. I could look at a pool in the backyard. I could look at the electrical. I could look at steps. I could look for holes in the yard. I could look and take a look at a lot of different things. Structural integrity of decks. I could look at lots of things in an inspection, which is really important. Self-verifications go a little bit further than that. What a self-verification does is you've identified those specific areas or topics that are creating concerns or potential concerns for you because they create or have the potential to create more serious events and incidents in your vacation rental property or business. Let me give you an example that I learned, right? And it's really important to take a look at incidents, right? We've had some discussions, and I'm certainly working on a way that we could learn and grow more from incidents within the industry so we can be more proactive. However, there's certain aspects of when you look at an incident, there's multiple things that you're going to find. And one of the things you certainly can find is what happened immediately. However, with Safer VRs, we like to dig deeper into what's happening. That's really what self-verifications do. So here's an example, and it goes back to my days with BP, and it goes back to that familiar incident you're familiar with in the Gulf of Mexico, the Macondo incident, where they had an oil rig explosion. Several people died in that accident. And then lots of loss and almost a loss of the business occurred. It's probably one of the worst case situations you could have. However, when you go back and read some of the reports, you think back, right, I was with the company, so I got some information. It's out there in some of the public records now. There was a visit to the rig. It's a drilling rig. They were drilling a new well, and it was some executives who had come out to recognize the team for doing a good job. No incidents had occurred. No injuries had occurred. And while they were there, they did some inspections. And one of the senior leaders went out and looked at fall protection and asked the team some questions, inspected their fall protection equipment, and didn't find any particular issues with the fall protection. They had maintained it in a really good and effective way. And so after that, they had a little celebration, and the team flew back to their base in Louisiana. And so what's really interesting about that is that a few days later, there was a well control issue that occurred. And what you typically have is you have two barriers to protect your well, from having a blowout or having a problem. You always have two barriers in between you and the surface. One of those barriers that's often, and you heard a lot about it, was the subsurface safety valve, right? You also heard about the rams that would close and basically shut the well, okay? Shut the well in before fluids reach the surface, which is what you don't want to do. And so you want to have at least two barriers in between there, right? And we could say, hey, even if we didn't understand oil and gas and drilling, I'm not an expert in well control or drilling, I do understand that there's a need to have two barriers of control that are tested and working to protect us, protect the workers on the drilling rig. Now, I would say that's a pretty important thing. And of course, in hindsight, we look at that today, and days and weeks after the incident, it became a bigger topic. It was one of those things where there's a lot of activity on the drilling rig. There's medical, there's first aid, there's all the energy control procedures, there's the well control procedures, there's the training for the guys and the team members there. There's a lot of different things out there. And when you go out and inspect, what are you really looking at? And in this case, they went and looked, this one person looked at fall protection because that individual was more familiar with fall protection. And that's really good. However, when you're on a drilling rig in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, that's not the most important thing probably that you should be looking at. And what they didn't have was a way to identify what were the most critical things in the operation that we needed to verify, not inspect, verify at some frequency, right? So we verify and confirm. When I verify something or confirm something, I go physically look at the piece of equipment, I go physically look at the documentation, and I make sure that you've told me it works. I see that it works, and I document it that it's working. It's not, well, I go look at something and I say, okay, you told me it's fine. As leaders, we need to be self-verifying the most important things that are out there that are impacting our guests, our owners, our properties, and our businesses. What those are, hey, this is the really good part. You get to decide, right? I put together the 9 life-saving rules for vacation rentals, and it's really, those are the ones that are there. And they're certainly out there, and I've done a couple of podcasts on a couple of them. However, you get to decide, you get to choose, what do I want my team and I to look at? What do we want to verify? And then after we verify something, we build this process around it, right? And when you look at some of the life-saving rules for slips, trips, and falls, right? There's some things that we are verifying, okay? And it's sort of like an inspection, okay? It is. However, when I built the 9 life-saving rules, let's talk about the one for slips, trips, and falls. You're going to quickly see in a hierarchy the 3 different levels of safety that we've covered in the past few weeks, maybe in the last 2 months, the gold standard, right? So I can go out and inspect for slip, trips, and falls. But one, is that a really good thing in my property? I'd say, if you have a multiple story property or that property that you're managing, certainly want to look at that. Elevation changes, those type things. So one is it starts out as an inspection, right? I'm looking for certain things. And the things that I'm looking for or those type of issues that would cause serious incidents or fatalities or harm to my owners, my guests, or some impact, loss of the property. So this is what I'm taking a look at. So I do an inspection, level 1. I look at level 2 is how am I inputting this into my processes so that I'm verifying that these are being maintained, right? So if I'm out there and I'm looking, I find a trip hazard as I enter the property. Okay, inspect it, done. Number 2, I want to fix it. How's my process for fixing it? And then do I have a way to self-verify that has been put into place, right? So now I've taken an inspection. I've implemented a correction. I have a process for that. And do I have a process to verify that these items are being done? So for example, in slips, trips, and falls, I have a whole bunch of questions that I ask in here. And it's the doorway or entry into level 3, right? Because what it's really doing is it's talking about, it says it's a checklist for preventing falls, but really what it is, it's a series of I am statements, okay? And when you begin, remember level 3, we're looking at our identity and how our subconscious mind is working. And each of these are I am statements, right? I am checking the strength and condition of railings annually. I'm ensuring that handrails are continuous from the top of the stairs to the bottom tread. I am inspecting for and removing tripping hazards along entryways and exits. So what we've done is we have a process now of I inspect, I mitigate, or I repair, I have a process to verify. And in my verification process, I begin to train my brain through I am statements. I'm reprogramming for slip, trips, and falls what is important. I am using rugs or floor mats with anti-skid backing. I am providing slip-resistant stairs with proper depth, width, and height for safe access. I am providing durable hand and guardrails. So now we've taken this process of I'm just looking at something and fixing it, or maybe mitigating the risk, right? And then I'm also focusing on what is the most important thing that's going to potentially injure or hurt my owners and guests or workers. See how we've evolved this a bit? And then we can go further with that and say, okay, if I'm looking and I'm seeing lighting issues in the entryway or exits or driveways or stairs, or, I have lighting issues and lighting is a lack of lighting allows for potential trips, right? If you were to go to someone's house that you hadn't been to before and they turned off all the lights and you arrived at night, or you returned home from, going to dinner, it would be really difficult, right, to see. So we understand that lighting is an important aspect. We check it, we verify it, and then we go a little deeper and say, what was broken in our processes that allowed for lack of lighting, right? Because it's really easy to change light bulbs. It's really easy. Maintenance goes over, they change light bulbs, inspectors go by, do that. But then we come back and we find light bulbs still not working. So maybe we have the wrong light bulbs, right? Or maybe we got some defective light bulbs. Or maybe someone said they changed the light bulbs and they didn't. Someone said they corrected the tripping hazard on the entryway and they didn't. Or maybe they missed one. I mean, we need to dig deeper into the why something is happening. We understand that we have a problem. We want to fix it, level 1. Level 2, I want to understand, why do I have a recurring problem with lighting at the properties? And what am I going to do to solve it? And so we dig deeper. And then we go into level 3 and we go into begin to reprogram our mind, our brains about what is really important, right? Remember my example back when we said there was individuals that would inspect the work. They would come in and check housekeeping, or they would come in and watch somebody do a job, and then they would provide feedback to them, right? And what it turned out was the intention was for the individuals performing the work to perform work safer without injuries or without mishaps. And what the study found, what we observed too, where I was working, is the individuals performing the inspection were 5 times less likely to be injured when doing or similar task, or to do a job more effectively. Because what was happening, they were programming their brain. They knew what the housekeeping standards were, and they would go through and look at them, maybe in an I am checklist, like I am checking under the bed for problems. I'm checking the refrigerator for the right temperature. I am checking the sliding door to make sure that it's properly latched. What am I checking? All these things, right? And I do it maybe 3 or 4 times a day, 3 or 4 times a week. And after many times, it begins to be programmed into our subconscious. And it's really important to take a look at that, right? So now we've delved into this whole world of why a self-verification process is more powerful than an inspection process, right? And it helps us move forward. And when we begin to identify the issues, we get to correct them. And, self-verifications is what we've built into what we call our Safer VR checks. And it's built into the gold standard, right? We identify what's really important. We talk to the employees about what they're looking for when they're doing safety inspections. We have a checklist, right? It's in Breezeway. We use it every month to check a property. It includes multiple things for preventive maintenance, right? Because we're proactive. We're looking for loss prevention issues in addition to fire and safety hazards, potential hazards in the properties that we manage. So we built this into level 2, and we're really beginning to knock on the door at level 3 of how our subconscious mind works and getting these programmed in there, right? The subconscious mind has all kinds of things in it, things that serve us and things that don't serve us. What we want to do is reinforce those things that do serve us and remove through a process of rewiring the brain or building the right neural pathways, as we've been talking with I am statements, right? The brain works very powerfully when we speak words, right? And speaking is really important. We speak the words that help us to show us what we want and how we want to be served. So if I say I'm inspecting for tripping hazards along the entryway and exits, that's more powerful than, saying something that says it's not as reinforcing. It could be where there are no tripping hazards, right? So sometimes what we say and how we say it is really the difference, right? Our words are super powerful and we speak things into existence. And here's a good example of that here in level 3. So we kind of did a quick cover about how self-verification process and self-verifications are more effective. Not saying that inspections are not effective, right? It's the surface level. It's level 1. And we may be repeating these events here. So we need a process here to check, to verify, to learn, and then to reinforce what are these particular behaviors or the observations that I want when I'm checking a property and reinforcing those. So that's kind of that is the self-verification process. It's worked extremely well. I've implemented it beyond not certainly incorporating what we call the level 3 part of the gold standard, but implementing self-verification processes has, in my work both in the US and Egypt, has produced significant improvements and results in the businesses that I was working in. And now I've taken this to the vacation rental industry. And I think it's super important for us to learn. And, one of the things that I've hit on in the past is, the vacation rental industry, while it has been around for a while, it's really growing in a significant way in the last 10 years or less. And it's going to continue. With growth comes these pains that we're experiencing through unfair regulation or through individuals who are not running businesses effectively that may cause these regulations. We have individuals who operate properties unsafely. They manage them, don't manage the safety aspects for the guests and for their owners. Some of it is because they don't understand. And typically when an industry, and I'll call it's in its youth, I won't say infancy here, they tend to have issues. And when these issues come up, they tend to let me say how to say it. You really need a significant incident to make a significant change in a particular industry. And we've seen it through the decades and centuries here in the United States and different parts of the world where other industries are growing, particularly manufacturing type situations, businesses. They grow, they don't effectively manage safety and health for their employees or their businesses. And typically a large loss occurs that significantly impacts the business and the industry as a whole. And my goal, one of many, is to work with vacation rental managers and owners to stop that from occurring. Because when it does, and I don't know what it's going to look like, right? I don't know. I mean, I talked about like the Macondo incident with BP. It was a significant incident, that loss of life and businesses and just lots of money spent, significant impact. And what it did is it changed the way the oil and gas industry drills wells. So back to my beginning there, and my goal is to not have to experience in the vacation rental industry a large significant loss. Certainly there's been fires, there's been loss of life, unfortunately, and it just hasn't gotten to where people are saying, you know what, we haven't reached the pain threshold. My message is I don't want us to reach a pain threshold, right? I want us to understand and start working at this today. So self-verifications are a way to do that. They're more effective. And certainly we have these tools in Safer VRs. So go out and take a look at safervrs.com. Send me a message. I'm always on LinkedIn just about, and I'd love to hear from you about this and about how Safer VRs is working or could work and help you in your business. I appreciate you listening today. Take some time and look at what you're doing. And maybe you're going to say, hey, am I at level 0 safety, doing some of this level 1 stuff, and how can I evolve? Love to help you with that. Anyway, go out today, create a safe day. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Safer VR's podcast with Eric Thibodeau. If you enjoy this, I would love you to join my Facebook group, The Safer Vacation Rentals, for more of the same. You can also join our email list at www.safervrs.com.